Sodor is peaceful, yet exciting in the autumn seasons. During the day, the engines would take their passenger and freight trains up and down the line. Recently, James had wanted to forget his recent experience at the Killdane Ironworks. The red engine, after derailing due to a pile of scrap, had fallen off the tracks, had witnessed the ghost of an engine, or engines, roaming the smelters, seeking its end. Edward's revelation to James had him with much to think about and to reconsider. However, much like with many ghost stories on Sodor, there always seemed to be a loose end or two. And one autumn day, James was having a sickening feeling in the sheds of that possibility happening. Sir Tom-Man had arrived at the sheds, puzzled but concerned for his number 5 engine. "Show a wheel, James. What seems to be holding you back?" James hesitated for a moment, but Sir Top-Man could tell something was off. "I take it your recent trip to the ironworks was, well, very eventful?" James froze, thinking back to that dark night. It was then James spoke up. I saw this horrifying-looking engine, sir. It had so many wheels, and Edward, well, he, Edward? What does Edward have to do with what you are telling me?" Then the station master walked up. "Sorry to interrupt, but there is a goods train that needs to be taken to the other end of the line. Last-minute change, I'm afraid." James's crew wasted no time, and before long, James was steamed and on his way to the yards. He was coupled to the train, and he sped down the line. He kept trying to clear his thoughts, but his mind kept circling back like it was on repeat. James knew he had to talk to Edward before something even worse was to happen. James arrived at Vickerstown and shunted the goods train at the bay platform. A Class 67 diesel left with the train in a hurry without saying goodbye. Thomas and Percy were the only ones at the sheds when James got back, but there was no sign of Edward, much to James's dismay. "Edward is stuck at Brennan Docks with Salty. My driver told me that rain is in the forecast. I sure hope everyone will be fine." James continued to get increasingly concerned. The next day, the rain cleared off, and despite the cooler weather, it made James more and more uneasy. James's driver and firemen were worried for their engine. That afternoon, Sir Tom-Man was approached by a television producer at Killdane Station. He brought with him his camera. James, who was waiting to leave with his passenger train, noticed this and took great attention to the conversation. "Good afternoon. What seems to be the... Hello, Sir Top-Man. I just wanted to show you our recent episode that aired the other day." "Oh?" The episode played. It was titled Halloween. In the episode, it featured Thomas, Emily, Percy, and even James. Sir Top-Man got a chuckle seeing himself in his pajamas. "Well, I never," chuckled Sir Topham-Hatt. "I remember that night like it was yesterday. And that's not all, sir. I even got special permission from a former university student who saw this abnormal ghost train and..." James froze at that moment. The footage was rewinded back to the moment of the quote-unquote ghost train's moment. While it was in a model set area, James felt it was all too real. Or was it? As the footage played, it showed a rusted tender engine passing by the camera through the dense fog, its lone little tail lamp illuminating the presence of the engine. It was all too quick, as it was there for a total of 5 seconds. James instantly recognized who or what it was. Sir! Sir! James, calm down. It was just an episode clip, and it's... Edward bustled into the platform, who was dropping off some supplies to the station book office. "Is everything alright, James?" Sir Tom-Man gestured to the producer. He played the moment again. Edward was shocked, and then felt sad. You did obtain permission, didn't you?" Edward said with concern. "Why, yes. I didn't bribe or scam that fellow. His name is even in the end credits, and regardless, what Edward saw was of a nightmare that actually took place in 1966. But there is, well, more to it, shall we say. And this was the story Sir Topham had told. My father, Sir Topham I, or the Fat Director, laid the foundation for Sodor in the early years. In 1966, a workman who was hired to work at the scrapyards at Killdane thought it best to preserve scrapped and deceased engines than to scrap them outright. Of course, these were in times before Sodor became a heritage line. Then a smartly dressed man walked up with Jenny Packard. Edward knew who that was. Good evening to you all, and hello Edward, long time no see. Great to see you, Frederick, and Miss Jenny Packard. Edward could tell something was wrong. The engine that you have described and witnessed back in the 60s, Edward. He was spotted at the ironworks and reportedly have given the ironworks twins a fright. James chuckled, but Edward gave a stern look in response. Sir Topham resumed his story. The workmen had good intentions of bringing steam back to the mainland, but the beaching axe was no joke. The strange-looking engine was scrapped on site, per the orders of the Fat Director. As the years passed, security was enhanced, and background checks were thorough. What about the workman? He surely was sent packing. After his surgeries, and the loss of one of his hands, he was sacked, of course. Finding other employment was proven difficult due to his track record. He died many years later due to health complications, but I can only imagine regret and sorrow for what he did. Then the guard blew his whistle and James puffed away with his train. None more the wiser, the television producer stared at the footage in disbelief. Call the recreation of the Killdane experiment the Halloween engine, if you kindly please. Will do. Edward puffed firmly away. Mr. Topham and the Packards on board. That evening, the sun was beginning to set into the sky. James and Edward were alone in the sheds. It was then that the old blue engine had made a plan. James, we must find the rest the Killdane experiment seeks. Like how? Calling the Ghostbusters? We will head to the ironworks. We will end the pain peacefully. Are you crazy, Edward? James, listen to me right now! James was taken aback. We don't do something about that ghost. It may pop up elsewhere on the island. Edward was right. James knew this had to be done before it got out of hand. After consulting their drivers, they double-headed to the ironworks. There they saw Ari and Bert. They were cross. The foreman showed that silly television episode. Our betrayals were amazing till the script was flipped and we ended up like cowards at the end. Well, you're not cowards. We have to be brave. The experiment is coming. Oh, you mean like when we were both spooked by it the other day and... Wait, listen. They could hear the sounds of rusty wheels turning, puffing from 3 engines at once. Familiar sounds to Edward and James. Puffing towards the engines was the Killdane experiment. Its whistles long and loud. The mangled engine with its pilot model body atop the 9F's chassis and its rusty tender behind, with only its little red tail end. Its smokebox door. The smokebox door was gone. In its place was what happened to be a contorted face, or faces. Everyone was shocked. Ari and Bert felt sick to their radiators, but James and Edward, unfazed by the vaunted specter, tried to reason. Listen here, Frankenstein. You come near me or my friends, I swear on the Bible of Audrey, I will... James, I got this. The experiment hissed steam in response. Edward looked directly at the ghost. I saw your first and only time in steam. Well, I saw the intent with that worker trying to save you from being scrapped, but he did it behind everyone's back. You've been haunting these very ironworks since your demise back 68 years ago. Now, this is where you find rest. The very rest you have been wanting to find for your end to come, at last. There was dead silence. No one Not even the drivers made a move. Then the Killdane experiment slowly puffed towards Edward. James was getting frantic. "Edward! Reverse! Reverse! Do something!" Edward remained perfectly still. He closed his eyes as the experiment puffed through the old blue engine's body, almost like their spirits intertwining. Then, it faded away into the distance, disappearing into the darkness. Forever. Everyone was at a loss for words. Even Ari and Bert were shocked. When Sutaman and the Packards heard about everyone's heroics, they were all pleased, and relieved that the Killdane experiment would no longer be haunting the Ironworks, or Sodor for that matter, ever again. The Ironworks is still a place most regret visiting or working at. Ari and Bert are still their gruff, cheeky selves. James had regained his confidence, but is still mindful towards scrap trains, not as much as he used to. As for Edward, he was given high praise from all the engines. Even Boko, Bill, and Ben were impressed. "Well, Edward, I guess we can call you a ghost tamer now." "Well, I do like that. I just like being wise old Edward." Everyone respected what the wise old engine said. That night, Edward took a moment of silence for what happened in 1966. His resolve in ending the Killdane experiment's haunting of the Ironworks, and his unwavering resilience to helping James and Sodor, for that matter, in bringing closure to a ghost engine who finally met its end.